life up to this point. I was born as most Dunmer are, in the land of Morrowind. Sadly, I never knew my parents, for after my birth I was orphaned. Several years would pass before I was adopted by a Nord named Alver. It was he who gave me my name, intending for me to keep to my kin's ways. He named me Methas. But as I grew to respect him, I took up his surname of Alver, and thus you may call me Methas Alver. Korst was a retired swordsman from Skyrim, where he had fought in many battles for his Jarls, all in the name of honor. Not long after I was adopted, he took it upon himself to teach me the way of the sword. However, first he handed me a hammer and materials. Before you start swinging a sword, you must first know its history. What better way to know a blade than to craft it yourself? Together we toiled and formed the iron, mostly at his instruction, into a sword fit for my arm. I was in awe of how the metal shaped to my will, how I was in control, and as he told me how to shape it, I began to understand his words. A swordsman is only as good as his blade. It can be sharper than any beast's fang, or more blunt than a stone. As long as it is made right and treated right, it will never betray you. I had too fast. My first sword was exceptional but crude. I expect that it would have failed had Korst not been there to instruct me. I was proud. For most of my short life back then, I had never owned anything of worth. That blade was mine. I crafted it with my own hands, and never will I forget that pride. As the years passed, me and Korst traveled Morrowind together. As we traveled, we trained, in both the ways of the craft and the way of the sword. The more we traveled, the more I learned from him. Years passed us by, and life was good. It was at the point that I had reached my 18th year that age had caught up to Korst. He was no longer able to travel, and so, with a heavy heart, he and I settled down at a home he had built far from much of a civilization. As Korst was fading, he had hoped to teach me one last move. However, it was during that time that I had lost the use of my left eye. At first, I had seen it as a hindrance, but soon enough, I found it was somehow helped me to strive to better myself, now more than ever. On Korst's last day, I did everything I could to make the passing as peaceful as possible. For the past 10 years, he had been my father, my teacher, my first adventuring companion, and above all else, my hero. Were it not for him, I would possibly still be living in the orphanage for another year or two, without a grasp on what my life meant. What kind of person would I be were it not for him? I'm glad that I will never know. On the last few hours of Korst's life, he had some friends and war buddies come to see him off. I never knew how many people this great man had touched until the very end of his life. There were hundreds of people. At this one man's funeral the following day, I had learned that I was not the first to be adopted by him. He had a total of 10 adopted children, all of which at this point were strong individuals who had grown up and to take his way of life. All of my brothers and sisters looked to me with proud smiles of the man their father had chosen to enter the family. As I'm writing this, I'm thinking fondly of the first night we all spent together, telling each other of how this great man had reached us, or had raised us. Of course, I hope you're proud. Some years passed. Food became scarce. I was becoming at a loss of what I should do with my life. Up to this point, the only thing I wanted to do was love and mourn Course. But as that passed in months, I moved on to just getting by in this home that me and Course built. This land I alone protected from whatever beast or ill soul invaded. It was during one of the odd nights I would find myself in the library of my old mentor. His collection was vast, and I had read every book once or several times, save one I had no idea about. It was tucked away in the back of the shelf. I had dropped the thing as it had been Course's journal. It told of his life as he arrived at Morrowind from Skyrim and sought to adopt again. I'll have to rewrite some of that into another section of this tome. After reading the journal, I felt I needed to travel, but I did not wish to leave the home abandoned, and so I contacted a relative who had been seeking to move into Morrowind. It was weeks before I heard a reply, but he and his family were overjoyed to not only have a place, but one built by our father. It is at this point that you join me. I'm now 25 and on a ship to the mainland of Tamriel, and I will be taking my first steps into Skyrim. In the coming days, I wish to retrace my father's footsteps and walk in his shoes for a time. Possibly like him, I would adopt, or even marry on this trip. Who knows what life brings? But I leave home knowing that it is in good hands. I only hope that I live through this adventure.